The Merger from Hell: How Wall Street Really Works by the Wall Street Avenger. At exactly 9:45 on a cold and dreary Wednesday night, February 25th, 1998, the CEO of one of the biggest banks in the world knocked on the door of a luxury suite at the Park Hyatt Hotel in Washington, D.C. He had agreed to meet one-on-one in absolute secrecy with one of Wall Street's most powerful movers and shakers. What would take place over the next couple of hours would set in motion a chain of events that nearly destroyed the financial system of the world. The man knocking on the door was John Reed, the straight-laced CEO of Manhattan-based Citibank. Reed had risen up through the ranks of the operations divisions of the bank to become CEO in 1984. Most of the CEOs of major money center banks come up through the banking side of the business. Reed's major claim to fame was that he was credited with being the first to adopt the use of ATMs in banks. Waiting for him on the other side of the door was Sandy Weill, the aggressive and blustery CEO of two major Wall Street investment banks, Salomon Brothers and Smith Barney, as well as the giant insurance company Travelers. Weill had invited Reed to meet clandestinely with him without explaining the purpose of the meeting. The two of them were in the hotel to attend a conference of several of the top business executives in the country. After a few minutes of small talk, Reed finally asked Weill what the purpose of the meeting was, particularly under such mysterious circumstances. Weill had planned to ease his way into the subject, but just couldn't contain himself, and he blurted out, "John, let's merge." A stunned Reed replied, "Gee, Sandy, I had no idea that's what you wanted to talk about." Before Reed could say anything more, Weill launched into an enthusiastic sales pitch in his rapid-fire style of speaking. "John, our companies are a perfect fit for a merger. Our services don't compete with each other, and we could cross-sell them to each other's customers. Citibank could offer checking accounts and other banking services to my Wall Street and insurance clients, and my companies could sell stocks, bonds, and insurance policies to your banking clients. It's a match made in heaven. One-stop shopping. We'll be the Walmart of financial services. This is the wave of the future, and we'll own the markets ahead of everyone else. We'll be co-CEOs so that neither one of us will be the boss over the other. You'll be Mr. Inside and run the operations, and I'll be Mr. Outside and deal with the clients. It's the perfect arrangement. But the most important thing is that you and I will become rich beyond our wildest dreams. The sky's the limit. What do you say, John?" Reed thought for a minute and said, "I see one big problem, Sandy. It's illegal." After the stock market crash of 1929, Congress passed the Glass-Steagall Act, which separated FDIC-insured depository banks like Citibank from merging with risky Wall Street investment banks and insurance companies. Without missing a beat, Weill replied, "Not to worry, John. I've got that covered." Reed said, "Well, if you say so, Sandy, let's do it." They shook hands. The world would never be the same from that day forward, but not in a good way. First thing in the morning, Sandy Weill picked up the phone and called Robert Rubin. Robert Rubin was President Bill Clinton's Treasury Secretary. Rubin and Weill were well acquainted with each other. Rubin had been CEO of Goldman Sachs during the period of time in the 80s and 90s when Weill was a corporate raider, buying up Wall Street firms and insurance companies on the cheap. Weill got right to the point. "Bob, I need you to get the Glass-Steagall Act repealed. If you can pull that off, I've got a job and a nice big corner office waiting for you at the new Citibank building." Rubin immediately called Bill Clinton. "Mr. President, I need a favor. I would like you to endorse the repeal of Glass-Steagall for our mutual friend Sandy Weill. Without hesitation, Clinton said, "Bob, if you say it's a good deal, you can count on me." With the most powerful man in the world backing the scheme, Rubin recruited Alan Greenspan, the chairman of the Federal Reserve. Rubin told the incomprehensible Greenspan that he wanted him to get Texas Republican Senator Phil Gramm, chairman of the powerful Senate Banking Committee, on board. Gramm was one of the most corrupt politicians ever to serve in Congress, so he was the perfect man for the job. With the implicit understanding that a plush Wall Street job also awaited him, Gramm enthusiastically pushed the repeal of Glass-Steagall through Congress. He even named the law after himself, the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act, or as it was known around Washington, the Citigroup Authorization Act. On November 19, 1999, Clinton signed the repeal of the Glass-Steagall Act into law. Soon after, Sandy Weill had a plaque made up with his picture on it and an inscription which read, "The Shatterer of Glass-Steagall," which he proudly hung on the wall of his office. Rubin and Weill congratulated each other on a job well done. Rubin resigned his job as Treasury Secretary and made a beeline for the Citibank building in Manhattan. As promised, a large corner office awaited him. As to the job, Rubin had no duties and no one reporting to him. Weill gave him the title of Chairman of the Executive Committee, whatever that means. This so-called job paid Rubin $10 million a year. Not too shabby for making a couple of phone calls. Rubin had to occupy his time somehow. One of his first projects was to help out a Citibank client, the soon-to-be indicted criminal enterprise also known as the Enron Corporation. Enron badly needed a loan to avoid bankruptcy. Rubin put a call in to one of his former colleagues at the Treasury Department, Peter Fisher. He asked Fisher to call the big three ratings agencies and order them not to downgrade Enron's credit rating so the company could qualify for a large loan at Citibank. Fisher politely refused and told Rubin, "Bob, that would not be a good idea for either one of us." This was sound advice because what Rubin was asking for was patently illegal. Soon thereafter, another situation came to Rubin's attention. The then current governor of Massachusetts, Deval Patrick, thought it was perfectly acceptable for a sitting governor to call the ever-accommodating Robert Rubin and ask him for his help in arranging another large loan from Citibank for a private company. That company was the biggest subprime mortgage originator in the country, Ameriquest, which was also nearly bankrupt. The CEO of Ameriquest, Roland Arnall, had put Deval Patrick on his board for the tidy sum of $300,000 a year. Patrick felt beholden to Arnall. After Patrick became governor, Arnall called him and asked him to persuade Robert Rubin to get Citibank to approve a sizable loan so that the failing Ameriquest could avoid bankruptcy. Shades of Enron. This time, Rubin came through, and Ameriquest got the loan. Unfortunately, Ameriquest still went down the tubes, and Citibank had to eat the loss. Way to go, Bob. During his 10 years at Citibank, Robert Rubin was one of the leading cheerleaders in pushing Citibank into becoming a major player in the highly risky subprime mortgage market that would ultimately plunge the bank into bankruptcy. Rubin opened the floodgates to disaster by engineering the repeal of the Glass-Steagall Act. This enabled Citibank and every other major institution to achieve the number one goal of Wall Street, maximizing annual bonuses. The icing on the cake for Robert Rubin was his unlimited use of Citibank's fleet of corporate jets. The married Rubin would regularly fly off to Miami to visit his girlfriend, Iris Mack. He had picked her up in the coffee line at the upscale Epicure coffee shop in South Beach. Rubin continued his romantic interludes even after Citibank began sinking beneath an ocean of red ink. Even Iris Mack questioned Rubin as to how he could spend so much time away from the bank during such a precarious period. After their breakup, Ms. Mack posted a detailed description of their relationship. It's entitled, "Bob Rubin Just Wants to Be Cuddled." It's still available online and makes for some very interesting reading. Robert Rubin was the federal government official most responsible for the repeal of the Glass-Steagall Act. He was also one of the people who financially benefited the most from the repeal, having pocketed over $165 million in salary and bonuses from Citibank. The repeal of Glass-Steagall was the fuse that lit the nuclear bomb that nearly blew up the financial system of the world. Robert Rubin was one of the most destructive people in American history, both in and out of government. Back to Sandy Weill. He was very confident that Robert Rubin would pull off the repeal of Glass-Steagall. So on April 6, 1998, only 6 weeks after the infamous Hyatt Hotel secret meeting, Sandy Weill merged Travelers Insurance, Salomon Brothers, and Smith Barney with Citibank to form Citigroup. This was a year and a half before Glass-Steagall was officially repealed. After the dust settled, Weill then put into motion part 2 of his secret strategy, getting rid of John Reed and making himself the sole CEO of Citigroup. Reed had served his purpose, and now he was excess baggage. Weill began quietly lobbying board members to oust Reed. He needed just one more vote on the board to make it happen. That of Mike Armstrong, the CEO of AT&T. Weill summoned Jack Grubman to his office for a closed-door meeting. Jack Grubman was a $20 million a year tech stock analyst who worked for Sandy Weill at Salomon Brothers. Weill told Grubman that he wanted him to, and I quote, "take a fresh look at AT&T's stock." That's Wall Street code for Grubman to upgrade his recommendation from a hold to a buy, which would significantly jack up the price of the stock and make Mike Armstrong even richer than he already was. Grubman said he could do that, but asked Weill, "Sandy, what's in it for me?" Weill replied, "What do you want, Jack?" Grubman said he'd been having a lot of trouble getting his kids into the prestigious 92nd Street Y Nursery School, which is harder to get into than Harvard. Weill said, "Consider it done, Jack." Soon after, Sandy Weill gave the school a $1 million gift from Citigroup's coffers, and Grubman's kids were accepted at the school. Grubman then upgraded AT&T stock to a buy. Mike Armstrong's net worth soared. He then voted to fire John Reed and make Sandy Weill the sole CEO of Citigroup. Gee, what a surprise. Everything went off like clockwork except for one little unforeseen detail. Unbeknownst to Weill and Grubman, New York State's Attorney General, Eliot Spitzer, had begun an investigation into corruption in the financial industry. Thousands of investors had complained about being misled by overly bullish stock analysts. Spitzer's office subpoenaed internal emails of the major investment banks, including Salomon Brothers. Included in the emails was one from Jack Grubman to a female stock analyst, Carol Cutler, with whom Grubman was having a torrid affair. He bragged to her about how he had engineered this brilliant coup d'etat. Here's the email. From Jack Grubman, Salomon Brothers, to Carol Cutler, Singapore Government Investment Fund. Everyone believes I upgraded AT&T to get the lead manager's role for Salomon Brothers for AT&T's wireless spinoff. Nope. I used Sandy to get my kids into the 92nd Street Y Nursery School, which is harder to get into than Harvard, and Sandy needed Armstrong's vote on our board to nuke Reed in a showdown. Once the coast was clear, for both of us, Sandy a clear winner, and my kids confirmed, I went back to my negative self on AT&T. Armstrong never knew that we both, Sandy and I, played him like a fiddle. Not surprisingly, the email was leaked to the press. Blaring headlines were splashed across the front pages of major newspapers. The episode was dubbed Nursery School Gate. Fortune magazine ran a story with the headline, "This little piggy went to nursery school." A public relations disaster was shaping up for Citigroup and Sandy Weil. The board of directors met to figure out how to handle the fallout. Outside counsel prepared a confidential report to the board. Board members were shocked when they read other X-rated email exchanges between Grubman and Cutler. The episode resulted in Jack Grubman being banned for life from the securities industry. Sandy Weil was given a choice: resign from day-to-day operations of Citigroup or go to jail. He resigned. Sandy Weil named his longtime corporate attorney Chuck Prince as his successor, presumably so he could still have some influence over the operations of Citigroup. Prince continued to expand Citigroup's fatal plunge into the risky subprime mortgage market, even though it was riddled with predatory and fraudulent subprime mortgages, otherwise known as liar loans. The feckless Chuck Prince was oblivious to the dangers of keeping tens of billions of dollars of risky subprime mortgage-backed securities unsold on the bank's books. When questioned about this, he famously replied, "As long as the music is playing, you've got to get up and dance." Shortly thereafter, Prince was fired and was danced right out of the building. But don't feel sorry for Chuck Prince. He was given a $100 million severance package as his reward for pushing Citigroup over the edge and into the abyss. On September 15, 2008, the day after Lehman Brothers declared bankruptcy, the stock market crashed. Soon thereafter, Citigroup was officially declared insolvent. But Hank Paulson, who succeeded Robert Rubin as both CEO of Goldman Sachs and Treasury Secretary, handed Citigroup a $476.2 billion bailout, compliments of the U.S. taxpayers. By the way, Citigroup's bailout surpassed the bailouts of every other financial institution in the world. It was equal to the budget of the U.S. Department of Defense. Epilogue. Several years later, Sandy Weil appeared on CNBC and said that the repeal of Glass-Steagall was a mistake. What we should do is split up investment banks from depository banks. Depository banks should just take in deposits and make commercial and real estate loans. Depository banks should not do things that are going to risk taxpayer dollars. Hey, I got an idea, Sandy. Why don't we call it the Glass-Steagall Act? We've still got the paperwork around someplace. Other than Sandy Weil, who was forced to take an early retirement, no one involved in the biggest financial fraud in the history of the world was charged with any crime or required to return any of the hundreds of billions of dollars they looted from their own firms. And it all started with a knock on the door that led to the merger from hell.